My name is Grace Moreno, and I still remember the smell of the bus that carried me to my graduation. It was part gasoline, part wet umbrella, part something metallic that never really washed out of city buses. I held my gown across my lap so it wouldn't wrinkle, though the fabric was already damp from the morning drizzle. Every jolt of the wheels made the tassel on my cap swing like a metronome, counting down to the moment I had dreamed of for 4 years. I checked my phone again, even though I already knew what I would see. A text from my mom glowed on the screen. "We're running late. Don't wait for us. Big news with Emily. We'll celebrate tonight." Attached was a photo of my little sister holding up a key fob in front of a shiny new Tesla, grinning as though she had just won the lottery. My parents stood beside her faces, split into proud, radiant smiles, the kind of smiles I used to fantasize about receiving from them. Another buzz followed a caption posted on Facebook. "So proud of our Emily High School grad and future star, nothing but the best for her. Tesla Day." Confetti emojis littered the screen. I scrolled quickly before the sting could settle. The man across from me, middle-aged and friendly, noticed my gown. "Big day," he asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted. "Your folks must be proud." I swallowed before answering. "They're busy." He nodded politely, not catching the weight of the word. I turned to the window, watching storefronts blur by the laundromat, where I once cried between loads, the deli, where Maya and I lived on bagels, the lamppost where I practiced a presentation aloud at midnight. This city had seen me fight for every inch. Today, finally, I was supposed to stand in the light. The bus jolted hard, throwing me against the cold metal bar. A little boy sitting up front pointed at my cap and shouted, "Look, Mom, she's a wizard." His laughter bubbled through the bus. I managed to smile, though my chest ached. Wizard. Maybe. Or maybe just a girl still waiting for her family to notice the magic she had been making all along. I squeezed the fabric of my gown, reminding myself that the stage didn't need their permission. Whether they showed up or not, I would. By the time I was 10, I had learned to live like the floor might tilt at any second. You brace for it. You carry plates with 2 hands instead of 1. You measure words before speaking, and you stop when you realize no one is listening. My mom said I was born ready, as if readiness were a badge, but I always heard something sharp under the praise. My dad was louder. He loved. An audience loved turning errands into stories. And when Emily was born 8 years younger than me, he had a brand new audience. At first, I adored her. She was tiny, full of surprises, and I loved holding her small hand in mine. But over time, the spotlight that once glanced my way bent entirely toward her. She became the sun, and I became the shadow that kept her cool. There were still warm moments. Dad running beside me as I learned to ride a bike, letting go with a triumphant shout. Mom wrapping my fingers in her gloves when I forgot mine. But those moments faded as Emily grew. Love in our house split into 2 channels, one noisy, sparkling, performed for neighbors and Facebook posts, and another underground, quieter, where I tried to sip whatever remained. On my 13th birthday, relatives filled our house. A bakery cake sat on the counter, the frosting letters melting in the heat. I had waited for weeks to blow out those candles. But just as the singing began, Mom tapped my shoulder and said, "Keep Emily entertained." Okay, she gets restless. By the time I returned from chasing her with a balloon, the candles were smoke. Everyone had moved on to laughing about an uncle's story. Emily handed me the balloon with a triumphant grin. "I saved you the purple one," she said. I forced a smile because at least she had remembered me. Incidents like that became routine. 7th grade, I won the science fair with a water filtration project I had improved from a library book. My parents congratulated me quickly, then rushed off to Emily's dance recital. Later that night, Mom told me the recital was beyond adorable, describing each costume in detail. No one asked about my project again. I polished my medal with dish soap and slid it into a drawer. High school cemented my role. Emily laughed, and the world leaned closer. Teachers loved her charisma. Neighbors loved her sparkle. I learned to be useful instead, folding laundry before Mom asked, updating the fridge calendar, making sure the dishwasher was empty. If Emily was the glittering star, I was the gravity that kept the house spinning. I didn't resent her exactly. I even envied her a little. But mostly, I wondered why I couldn't seem to be both needed and noticed. My parents liked to brag to friends that I never needed much, as if invisibility were an achievement. To cover college applications, I started tutoring at the public library. The late afternoon sun cast honeycomb patterns on the carpet. Sergio, who hated commas, wrote poems about his grandfather's calloused hands. Ari, who loved algebra, but feared everything else, solved equations like puzzles hidden under sand. Those hours mattered because someone showed up, because the work left a mark, because in that small circle, I was not invisible. At home, the arguments sharpened. Curfews, car privileges, my father's habit of canceling our plans because Emily needed a ride or a pep talk. I learned not to wait for him. I walked instead, headphones, in convincing myself that independence was better than disappointment. The day my Columbia acceptance arrived, my heart nearly beat out of my chest. I read the email 3 times. My mother cried, my father said I would make the family proud, and Emily asked if she could have my room once I left for the dorms. Everyone laughed, and I laughed too, because it was easier than demanding more. Freshman year in New York was noisy, but freeing. The city roared, and for the first time, I wasn't echoing someone else's story. I took early labs and closed late shifts at a coffee shop. I slept in fragments. I ate too many bagels. When I called home, Mom asked about Emily. Did she need money? How was her dance team? Was she dating? Sometimes I put the phone down and watched my reflection in the dark window, answering questions no one had asked me. One night, too tired to sleep, I bought a red notebook from the campus store. On the first page, I wrote only 5 words. Show up for yourself. It was a note to a future version of me, a dare scribbled in ink. I didn't know then how many times I would come back to that line, gripping it like a lifeline. Columbia was supposed to be my chance to finally step into the light, but those first months felt more like living under fluorescent bulbs, always buzzing, never warm. Tuition was covered by my scholarship, but the rest of the bill was mine to figure out: rent, books, groceries, laundry, all the tiny invisible costs of surviving in New York City. That was how I ended up at Brewhaven, a coffee shop tucked under the rumble of the 1 train. The air inside smelled permanently of burnt espresso and wet coats. I wore the same faded apron every night, my hair pulled back, my shoes sticky with syrup by the end of each shift. Between classes and shifts, sleep became optional. I carried trays of cappuccinos while running lines of code in my head, wiped counters, while memorizing formulas, folded myself into 20-hour days because I didn't know another way. Exhaustion was the tax I paid to stay afloat. Still, there was pride in it. Every paycheck meant I could buy the required textbook instead of relying on the library's single copy. Every tip meant another week of subway rides. Pride stitched itself into my fatigue, though no one back home knew how much it cost. Maya, my roommate, was the first person to call me out. She sprawled across our futon earbuds, leaking indie rock, and said, "Grace, you're acting like suffering is your sport. Nobody's giving out medals." I laughed it off, but when she started leaving sticky notes on my desk, "Eat something green today. Don't forget water. Sleep seriously," I felt something I hadn't in years seen. Then there was Professor Carter. He taught applied computer science with a kind of patience that made silence feel generous. One afternoon, he paused at my workstation as I tinkered with an algorithm for verifying secure payments. "You ever think about building this out?" he asked. My shoulders rose defensive. "It's just practice." He shook his head. "No, you've got the bones of something important here. Don't bury it." That single comment lived rent-free in my head. ShieldPay didn't begin as a company, just a puzzle that wouldn't let me go. I spent nights in the computer lab with vending machine coffee code collapsing in red error messages and then resurrecting after hours of trial. Maya would swing by, plop a bagel on my keyboard, and tease, "You look like a raccoon who found electricity." I'd laugh, then keep typing. By sophomore year, the project had teeth. At Maya's dare, I entered a national student research competition. I wore a blazer borrowed from her cousin, pitched my clunky prototype in a ballroom filled with skeptical eyes, and left stunned with a $25,000 prize. For once, my name was printed on a giant check. I carried it back to the dorm like proof that maybe I wasn't invisible after all. The money went straight into Shield Pay. Professor Carter introduced me to alumni who worked in venture capital. A month later, I found myself in a glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor of a midtown tower, the skyline jagged outside. I stumbled through my pitch palms damp, expecting them to laugh me out of the room. Instead, one of them leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "We'll give you $1 million for seed." I signed the paperwork with trembling hands, then rode the subway home with the contract pressed flat against my chest. On the ride, I almost dialed my mom, almost let the words spill. Look, I did something big. But then I remembered the birthday cake. I never cut the metal that gathered dust, the phone calls where my updates were footnotes to Emily's spotlight. I slid the phone back into my pocket. This victory would stay mine, at least for now. ShieldPay grew faster than I could breathe. Investors demanded updates. Professors pulled me into panels. Reporters emailed for quotes. My inbox became a second full-time job. Sleep shrank further. I was always running between class, the coffee shop, the lab investor calls. Some days, I swore I could feel time peeling pieces off me like bark. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, pulsed a steady hum of triumph. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to life. I was steering it. I had carved out a current of my own. Every late night, every skipped meal, every MetroCard swipe, built a world that belonged to me. Still, the old ache lingered. As senior year closed in, invitations for graduation landed in everyone's mailboxes. Families booked hotels, planned dinners, bought flowers. I kept checking my phone for confirmation, for my parents promised that they would be there. Instead, I got silence. When I finally called to ask, my mother's voice was distracted. "We'll see, honey. Emily's senior banquet is the same week. You know how important this is for her." I hung up my chest hollow. I had built something worth notice, but maybe in their eyes, I would always be the girl expected to manage on her own. Graduation was coming with or without them. And I was terrified I already knew which it would be. Commencement. Morning arrived heavy with expectation. The kind of day when the air feels thicker, because it knows something is supposed to happen. I woke before sunrise, too restless to sleep, and ironed the gown twice, even though it would wrinkle the moment I sat down. My cap rested on the desk like a dare. Maya knocked on my door with coffee in hand, her eyeliner sharper than usual. "Ready to be famous?" she teased. I laughed, but my stomach was a knot. The bus ride downtown felt endless. The city clattered and groaned as if it too was running late. Families pressed through the campus gates with bouquets and balloons. My phone stayed silent. The last message from Mom. "We'll try if we can," hovered at the top of the thread. I wanted to believe, but if is a word that cuts both ways. Maya grabbed my arm at the staging area. "Hey, whether they're here or not, you're walking that stage. You're the story." Her words steadied me. Professor Carter gave me a small nod, his regalia, making him look like a tired medieval bishop. The procession began with a drumline that rattled my ribs. Gowns swished, tassels bobbed, the rows of white chairs gleamed in the sun. My hands sweated against the folded program that printed my name under student speaker. For years, I had wanted nothing more than for my parents to see my name in ink. Now, I wasn't sure if I wanted them here at all. When the president called me to the stage, the world narrowed to wood steps and a microphone. The crowd blurred into a sea of dots. My voice came easier than I expected. I told the story of a night in the lab when everything broke until it didn't, about how persistence is often invisible until it suddenly isn't. I spoke about showing up for ourselves so we can show up for others, about resilience as an act of quiet rebellion. The audience laughed at the right lines, hushed at the heavy ones. I felt the plaza lean in. When I said the word family, my throat tight around it. I didn't cry, but the pause carried my history. Applause swelled when I stepped back. The president returned to the microphone, flipping through his notes. "What many of you don't know," he said, is that Grace has also been building something extraordinary outside this campus. Her company ShieldPay recently closed a seed round and was recognized by Forbes 30 Under 30. A ripple moved through the plaza. Heads turned. I bowed my head, flushed suddenly shy. And then I saw them. My parents slipping into the aisle as though the ceremony had waited for them. My father's tie crooked, my mother's hair slightly undone. They looked around, confused, searching for me on the stage. When my father spotted my face on the jumbo screen, his eyes widened. The program slid from his hands to the ground, pages fluttering. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to his expression. Shock, pride, confusion, and something close to fear. The ceremony moved on, names called, degrees conferred. I sat stiff in my chair, every nerve aware of the two people now in the audience. When it ended, chaos broke loose, graduates tossing caps, families surging forward. I slipped down the side stairs, but they found me quickly. My mother reached for my sleeve as if touching me would confirm what she had heard. "Grace," she whispered, "why didn't you tell us?" My father tried to recover with his old showman grin. We would've. Wow, kiddo. Look at you." I held their eyes. My voice stayed steady. "I wanted to stand here without asking you to look. Tonight, I'm celebrating with my team. You can join for a toast, but the rest of the night is mine." The words weren't cruel, but they were final. For the first time, I felt the boundaries solid under my feet. My mother blinked, something loosening in her posture. My father bent to smooth the program as if he could iron out the years between us. Neither of them argued. The plaza eventually emptied, leaving confetti scraps fluttering like tired butterflies. My parents lingered near the fountain, hesitant, while Maya tugged me toward the group of friends waiting with flowers and cameras. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for turning my back. The reception was a blur of hugs, photos, and champagne served in plastic cups. Everyone seemed to know me, or at least wanted to. Professors clapped my shoulder, classmates asked for pictures, strangers congratulated me as if we had shared something. My parents hovered at the edges, smiling too wide, as though they could stitch themselves into the story retroactively. "Dinner, Grace." Mom asked when the crowd thinned. "We booked a table, I can't." I said soft but certain. "I promised my team." "They carried me here." Her face fell, then stiffened. Dad jumped in with his old bravado. "We can pick up the tab, big night, huh?" "Let us treat you." I shook my head. "It's not about money. It's about who shows up." They didn't push further. Maybe they sensed the line I had drawn was carved deep. That's when Emily crossed the plaza. She had skipped across the pavement in heels too tall for her, the Tesla key fob still dangling from her wrist. For once, she didn't look like a princess on parade. Her eyes were wide, uncertain. "Grace," she said, almost breathless, "can I come with you? Just tonight?" I hesitated. Old resentment rising like smoke. But beneath it, I saw something I'd never noticed before. A kind of weariness, the cost of being the golden child. I nodded. "Yeah, come." Dinner was messy, crowded, perfect. ShieldPay's team toasted with cheap champagne. Maya made me promise not to open my inbox, and Professor Carter embarrassed me with stories about buggy demos. Emily sat quietly at first, then leaned close. "It's exhausting, you know," she whispered. "Being the favorite. Everyone thinks it's easy, but it's like a mask you can't take off." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I slid my hand across the table and covered hers. She squeezed back. That was enough. A year later, ShieldPay had grown past the pilot stage. Contracts pushed our valuation north of $1 billion, though numbers mattered less than the scholarship fund I created for first-generation students. 10% of profits redirected to kids like me, kids who carried themselves when no one else did. Emily took a gap year in New Mexico, installing solar panels for low-income families. She sent me photos of herself in dusty jeans, hair tied back, cheeks smudged with grease. She looked real uncurated, like she had finally stepped out of the role scripted for her. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We stumbled, argued, backslid, but we were learning to see each other not as rivals, but as sisters. As for my parents, we spoke occasionally. Holidays were polite surface level. They were proud now, of course. They told friends about my company, bragged about headlines they hadn't read fully. Pride after the fact doesn't erase absence before, but I no longer needed them to. Boundaries had become my language of love. I'll meet you where it doesn't cost me myself. On the anniversary of graduation, I found myself back at the bus stop. The shelter had been repainted, the ad replaced, but the cold steel pole was the same under my palm. I stood there a long moment, watching buses hiss and sigh, thinking about how far a single ride can carry you, not just across boroughs, but into a life you've built by choice. Family should be the people who show up. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you build a new circle, from friends, mentors, even a sister who finally crosses the line. That night, under fluorescent light, I promised myself again, I will keep showing up for them, for me, for the life I'm still building. And this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone else to see it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.